This week we're learning Parashat Vayakhel and Pikudei, and I'm going to share with you a massive novelty from our Rav Aryeh Leib Heyman. May his merit and blessing be upon all of us. And as the main topic of this week's Torah portion is nevertheless the Tabernacle, the Mishkan, many write about and many speak about the untimely warning and commandment that Moses adds about the observance of Shabbat. If you take a look at your screen, I'll share with you the verse. The verse is in chapter 35, verse 2. Right after Moses gathers the Jewish people, it says, Sheshet yamim ta'aseh melacha. Moses goes and tells them, 6 days you shall work. Ubayom hashu yelechem kodesh. On the seventh day shall be a day of holiness and sanctity for you. Shabbat Shabbaton. Second. Shabbat Shabbaton Lashem kol ha'oseh bo melacha yumat. It will be a day of complete rest for the Lord, and whoever performs melacha, work for prohibited actions, shall be put to death. Rashi asks the famous question, why is Moses inserting this over here? And we've mentioned it time and time again. Rashi teaches us, based on the Talmud, that Moses is telling the Jewish people, as important as the construction of the temple and the tabernacle, nevertheless, Shabbat overrides it. Don't think that you shall build the Mishkan, the tabernacle, on Shabbat. Shabbat, stop! Reb Leib says, do you know what Rashi in essence is telling us? What Rashi is telling us is that Shabbat is more important than the tabernacle, more important than the Mishkan. If you'd put two on a scale, Shabbat outweighs the Mishkan. He says this is clear because Shabbat still has to be observed if the occasion rises to have to build the Mishkan as it came up. But he brings a proof that Shabbat is stronger, more important than the Mishkan, that we see even nowadays. He says the Shabbat is still observed, and it always was observed. From ever since it was given until today, Shabbat has been observed. Maybe not by all, but Shabbat has always been observed. In contrast to the Mishkan, to the tabernacle and the temple, which had its offs and ons, and unfortunately, mostly not around. He says that is another proof to show us how the Mishkan is not as strong as Shabbat. Shabbat is stronger. He asks a question. Reb Leib asks, if Shabbat is more important than the tabernacle, then why is Shabbat represented secondary to the tabernacle throughout our Torah? How so? Take a look. The 39 melachot, the 39 prohibited prohibitions that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat, where are they learned from? From the construction of the Mishkan. That would lead me to think that the Mishkan is greater than Shabbat. Number one. Number two, the Torah just spent, we're now finishing the last Torah portion in the book of Exodus. The Torah spends the last 5 Torah portions, full parashas, of the book of Exodus, explaining in great detail every part, every aspect of the Mishkan and its service and its vessels and its garments. When it comes to Shabbat, it's not mentioned anywhere as close to as often as that, and it's in a short, non-detailed way. By the way, most of the Shabbat observance that we have nowadays that we fulfill is all based on the oral Torah. In the Torah, there's very little written about Shabbat. There's Shamor Shabbat, observing Shabbat, remembering Shabbat, don't light fire on Shabbat, but that's pretty much it. Not 5 long Torah portions. So for these 3 reasons, number one, that the 39 prohibited actions are learned from the Mishkan, and the amount of time spent in the Torah is much more on the Mishkan rather than on Shabbat, and for the fact that we're just mentioning now here Shabbat en passant, just in passing, in respect to the Mishkan, it seems like the Mishkan would be more important than Shabbat. So in order to understand this, Reb Leib says the key to understanding this puzzling phenomenon of why Shabbat seems to be so concealed and so secondary in our Torah is based on the following Talmud in Masechet Shabbat, page 10b. In Masechet Shabbat, page 10b, God comes to Moses. The Talmud recounts how God comes to Moses and tells him, Moshe, I have a great and special gift in my treasury. In Hebrew, the word is bet genazai. It's like my vault. It's like my safe, hidden. And I want to give it to the Jewish people. Please go and let them know that I wish to give it to them. Reb Leib says, 1 second. Why is Shabbat considered to be a hidden treasure of God? That it's in his vault, it's in his safe, hidden away. The concept of Shabbat was something known to the entire world from the very beginning of creation, from the seventh day, when God himself rested from creating on Shabbat. Why is Shabbat considered to be concealed and hidden? Reb Leib says, you know what Hashem's intention was? His intention was the holiness of Shabbat. The holiness and the influence it provides, that is hidden and concealed. Most of the Shabbat observance revolves around shamor, guarding, aspects of prohibitions and restrictions. The zachor, the remembering, is just an obligation that's fulfilled verbally by reciting and performing kiddush. Most of Shabbat is shamor. Maybe you want to say the lighting of the Shabbat candles also is zachor. So you have two. You have lighting Shabbat candles and doing kiddush. That's it. That's the active aspect of Shabbat. Everything else is just a prohibition and a restriction. The Reb Leib says that in itself is an aspect of being hidden. Hold that thought for a moment about the difference of the revolving around the negative or the prohibitions and the restriction aspects of Shabbat. Hold that thought, and Reb Leib says that we can now understand a story that took place around the time of the Second Temple. There was a wicked man, his name was Turnus Rufus. He was a wicked, wicked king, horrible, and he came to Rabbi Akiva. Turnus Rufus came to Rabbi Akiva and he told him, what's the difference between today and tomorrow? They would have always these philosophical debates. The kings and the leaders of the Gentiles back then, they would be very intrigued. And Turnus Rufus comes to Rabbi Akiva and says, what's the difference between today and tomorrow? Today's Friday, tomorrow's Shabbat, no difference. Rabbi Akiva answered very wisely, and he says, what's the difference between Turnus Rufus and any other mighty man? Just as the appearance is the same, however, seems to me like there's no difference. But you know, Turnus Rufus, Rabbi Akiva says, that you are very different, that you are greater than any other man, any other mighty man. So too Shabbat, he says. Shabbat does not look different than any other day of the week. The sun rises in the east, sets in the west. Some Shabbats are sunny, some are cloudy. Some rain, and some are windy, some are perfect weather. There's no physical way that one may differentiate between Saturday and Sunday, or Friday and Saturday. Every day physically looks the same. If we look at all of the restrictions on Shabbat, says Reb Leib, every single restriction, the 39 melachot, the prohibited acts, are the very same actions needed to build the Mishkan. And that's because the holiness of the Mishkan is apparent and revealed. Unlike Shabbat, Reb Leib is saying the holiness on Shabbat is not apparent and not revealed. It's concealed. It's not obvious to anyone. That's why the Mishkan has descriptions in the Torah which express things that are above nature and visible. At the end of this week's Torah portion, at the end of Pikudei, take a look at your screen. The Torah tells us, this is in chapter 40 in Exodus, verses 34 and 35. Vaychas ha'anan et ohel moed, uchvod Hashem malet hamishkan. That a cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the Mishkan. Next verse, Velo yachol Moshe lavo el ohel moed ki shachan alav ha'anan uchvod Hashem malet hamishkan. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud rested upon it, and the glory of the Lord filled the Mishkan. In essence, what the Torah is telling us is that there was an apparent and physical visibility to the holiness that there was in the tabernacle, in the Mishkan. And that was that a cloud covered it. Can you imagine if every single Shabbat a cloud would come and hover over every Jewish home, and only the Jewish homes? It never doesn't happen. Never happens. But by the Mishkan it did. Reb Leib says because the Mishkan, the holiness, the sanctity, was visible and above nature. In Parashat Shemini, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 9, verse 24, another example of the visibility and the apparent knowledge of the holiness of the temple. And fire went forth from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fats upon the altar. Vayar kol ha'am, vayaronu vayipelu al penehem. And all the people saw and sang praises and fell on their faces. Again, Reb Leib is proving that the holiness that took place in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, was visible. Can you imagine that? You place on the altar the sacrifice, and fire from above, from the heavens, comes and consumes it. That's an obvious miracle above nature. Hashem is telling the Jewish people, Shabbat is not the same as the Mishkan. Shabbat is a great and special gift, but it's hidden. It will stay hidden even after I give it to the Jewish people. Its holiness will reside in their souls, not visible or apparent at all. The Reb Leib says that there's one anomaly to this rule. One place that Shabbat's holiness was not hidden. In every other case, in every other way, Shabbat's sanctity and holiness is hidden, but there's one rule, one time that rule is broken and visible to all. It was by the man, by the wonder bread that came down. The manna came down on Friday double and did not come down on Shabbat. That's visible. It's visible if you normally come home with one loaf, now you're coming home with 2 loaves, and then the subsequent day nothing falls. If every day a certain amount is falling and something changes, well, now that's something that's visible. To the point where Moses says to the Jewish people, Exodus chapter 16, verse 29, Re'u ki Hashem natan lachem et ha-Shabbat. See, Re'u, look, Hashem has given you the Shabbat. Reb Leib says, you know why Moses is using the terminology of Re'u, look? Because this will be the one and only time you'll ever be able to see the sanctity of Shabbat. It's the only time that it will be visible. Re'u. The only time. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. At that point, you'll be able to see a glimpse of the holiness of Shabbat, as Reb Leib. But the rest will be concealed. During the creation, Reb Leib says the Torah blessed and sanctified the Shabbat. Look at chapter 2 in Genesis, verse 3. Vayvarech, which is blessed, Elokim et Yom HaShevi'i. God blessed the seventh day of the week. Vaykadesh oto, and he sanctified it. He blessed and he sanctified it. What's the difference? Well, Rashi quotes the Midrash. The Midrash tells us as follows. Again, that was in chapter 2, verse 3 in Genesis, that Hashem blessed the Shabbat by giving it a double portion coming down on Friday when it came to the man. Double came down. And he sanctified it because no man came down on Shabbat. He blessed the Shabbat of having a double portion precede it and come to bless it. And he sanctified Shabbat that no man will come down. Reb Leib explains that this, and the Midrash, that this verse was actually testifying to the future of when the Jewish people would be wandering for 40 years in the desert and having this blessing of the man and the sanctification. If it were not for this great phenomenon of the man, explains Reb Leib, we, the Jewish people, would have never seen any physical difference between Shabbat and any other day. We would have no physical visibility that attests to Shabbat's superior holiness over any other day of the week. So now, the $1 million question. Ron, I see it on your forehead. I know you're asking it. So why? Oh, you're trying to cover it. So why was the only revealed visibility of the holiness of the sanctity of Shabbat done by the man? Why only then? Why can't today, when I go to the grocery store on Shabbat and I swipe my credit card, automatically only half is charged because it's for Shabbat? Or why can't it be that automatically when I come in with 2 bags of food for Shabbat, it doubles up and there's 4 bags? Why can't it be that the candles that I light, that I only put enough for an hour's oil on Shabbat, last all Shabbat long? Give me one physical visibility that will prove to me that Shabbat is different and superior, more holy than any other day of the week. Why only was it by the man? Honestly, it's not fair. You're telling me this is the holiest day of the week, but you're not showing it to me or proving it to me. Reb Leib gives a very strong answer. This answer, I think, answers a lot of questions we have in life, and it just reappears itself over here by this concept of the superior sanctity and holiness that Shabbat has. He says, you know why specifically by the man was Shabbat's holiness visible to all? Because remember, which generation are we speaking about? We're speaking about Dor De'ah. We're speaking about the generation of knowledge, the generation of the Midbar, of the desert. They were living with complete, full miracles on a daily basis. They saw God in a way, and God's might and power in a way that no one else has or will ever see. The man, that bread that fell from heaven, was just another one of the great open miracles that was being done consistently. What do we know about nature, says Reb Leib? Nature is the way that God hides himself, the way he conceals himself, with layers, hiding the different levels of spirituality that are actually in this world. What makes nature natural, as funny as that sounds? It's one word: consistency. Mom, I saw you wanted to say that. Consistency is the definition of nature. Why is that? Because whoever said that we have to take for granted that the sun rises every single day and sets every night? Why? If 2 suns would raise in one day, that's it. Everyone thinks the world's coming to an end, or we're not going to stop talking about it or contemplating it. And wait, what if the Torah would have predicted that on March 11th, tomorrow morning, 2021, two suns are going to rise, and they both rise. I mean, who would not fulfill the Torah? What is nature there to do? Nature is there, as Reb Leib says, to conceal God in order to give a fighting chance for each and every human being to have free will to choose whether they want to believe or not, whether they want to observe or not. Again, if we take the creation of a fetus and a baby and the development of a child, we take it for granted. It's natural. What makes it natural? Makes it natural to us because we've seen it so many times and it's consistent to us. It's something we expect. But when we pause and stop and we say, wow, that is a miracle. It's a miracle the sun rises. It's a miracle that babies are created and born. And it's a miracle that our bodies are able to digest food. And those are just three off the top of my head. We can go on and on and on. It's a miracle that light illuminates and allows us to see in the dark. No, it's nature. What makes it natural? Because it's consistent to us. Explains Reb Leib. The miracles were consistent for that generation, the generation in the desert. To them, there was no reason that Shabbat should conceal its sanctity and its holiness. Because that was not going to make a Jew back then keep Shabbat or not. Because they were living in open miracles day in and day out. Shabbat, says Reb Leib, had no reason to hide its sanctity. However, today, or ever since the Jewish people stopped living in that generation of open miracles, ever since they crossed over the Jordan River, and all the way till today, since we're not living with open and revealed miracles, can you imagine if every Shabbat there was a sign? The clouds formed a Shabbat Shalom every single week. Who would not keep Shabbat? Can you imagine if whoever kept Shabbat, automatically they'd go in after Shabbat and check their banking statement, and it was doubled? I mean, who would not keep Shabbat? It's just impossible not to. What's the problem with that? Is that we don't have free will anymore. We're not choosing. And as we've spoken about time and time again, ever since Adam and Eve sinned by eating from the tree of knowledge, the evil inclination entered this world and in our bodies in a way that we have this duality, this constant struggle. And from then on, we were given free will to choose or not, to believe or not, to observe or not. And ever since then, we are to prove ourselves to God because we don't want to eat from, as the Zohar says, the bread of shame. We want to earn our reward and our merit in this world and in the world to come. So if God is going to do an open miracle, if Shabbat is going to be openly revealed today in 2021, it's no choice anymore. He'd be robbing us from our free will in order to make the right decision. So back in the time of the generation that traveled the desert, miracles were left, right, center, nonstop. So of course, Shabbat was able to express itself and reveal itself, a glimpse of its sanctity and holiness. Today, physically, there's no difference between Shabbat and Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, or any other day of the week. You know where the difference is? Here, in our hearts, in our souls, here in our minds, here in our speech, in our actions. We are able to choose how we make Shabbat different than every other day of the week. And if we choose not to, then it's exactly like any other day of the week. Nothing special at all. You know what you're doing? You're just overlooking and passing that opportunity to connect, that opportunity to bask in the holiness and the sanctity that the day has to offer. The man proved it, a little glimpse for us, that it's there. But it will not be shown again, not be revealed again. It will not be visible. The Mishkan, that was a time when the Jewish people were living with tremendous amount of miracles. So fine. Well, that which took place there was physical and miraculously open to all. Today, it's not so. Because today, we always have to have a fair fight of free will. This should make us pause and contemplate. Should I be able to learn more? Should I commit myself to learn more? Because the more we learn, the more we're able to do. The more we learn, the more we're able to understand God in our own way, in the way that our sages have shared with us. And we're able to understand God more so we could commit ourselves more and observe more and do more. And eventually receive more merit and more reward. And a closer connection with our Creator. And face it, observing Shabbat today is an easy sale. I say this over and over. It's so important. Yes, some people enjoy, whether you live up north, it's skiing. Whether here down south, it may be jet skiing, water skiing, golfing, whatever it may be. Some people have a hard time of letting go of the things that they've always been doing for their weekends. But that, unfortunately, all we're doing is we are overlooking, passing over a golden opportunity of a day of holiness and sanctity, which provides blessing for the rest of the week, for the rest of our life. And again, we will not see any physical difference with Shabbat, besides for what we do, besides for us getting dressed nicer, besides for us preparing a nicer meal, having a white tablecloth, besides for us walking and strolling to the synagogue and enjoying that. Besides for whatever we do on Shabbat, there will be no physical difference or visibility, because then our free will be robbed from us. And God promised us that he will not let us eat from the bread of shame, that we will work for, appreciate, and achieve greatness through our choices and the choices to do right. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. And I think this is the first time in a long time that I finish at 8:59. So, if anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself and go for it. Isaac.
A statement. If we had any miracles, whether it is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and you saw this open miracle, it's obvious that they would keep more the Shabbat because it's part of the Torah. So you would need just a miracle to be on Saturday, on Shabbat. It could be any day of the week. Of course, we have those open miracles if we appreciate them, but I mean, visible the way that you mentioned.
Right. So we don't, because to preserve our free will.
And when Moshe was, there were open miracles. It's not only on Shabbat, but every day, like you say.
Exactly.
We don't have it now.
Exactly. So that's why I said at the beginning, this is an example. This concept of Shabbat's holiness being concealed is just an example to so many other, it's an answer to so many other questions and things that are concealed from us throughout our lives. Right? That's why we don't understand why sometimes people get sick and why sometimes people get healed and why some people are born or some people pass away or people are successful, other people are struggling. These are all things that are concealed from us in order to preserve our free will.
Correct. That's a good point. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Yes.
Do you think if more people observed Shabbos, let's just take it for a minute, like they said, if we could observe 2 Shabbos in a row, great things would happen. So, okay, maybe that's the epitome. But so do you think, like we do Shabbos across the world, we do it across America, it's called, right? So
Shabbos Project.
Yes. So do you think if we did more Shabbos, more things would be would more things would be revealed to us as a whole?
I would hope, I would wish so, but it's not true. Because then it would be tampering with our free will.
That's what I'm saying. So that's my point. How important, to what point do we let go of, I guess we never let go of free will. But if more blessings come into our life, then one would think more would be revealed.
Right. You're right. That's why Hashem sends us signs and messages, but they are not super clear. Right?
Tell me about it.
They're up for interpretation.
Yes.
And they're up for interpretation in order to preserve our free will. Yes, a strong and connected, believing person, they have these small messages and they grow from them and they connect to them and they are inspired from them. But it's still only an inspiration and an interpretation opposed to something being an outright open sign.
Well, it was a beautiful class.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed a lot of food for thought.
Why is there always a disproportionate amount of women to men on your class?
Rabbi Laredo?
I have something to say about that, but I won't say it on camera.
Rabbi
Someone else
Laredo?
wants to.
Shalom.
Women are higher spirituality-wise.
Yes. We have a question from LA, Mrs. Terani.
Shalom. How are you doing, Rabbi?
Very.
It was beautiful. I want to know, how do you answer a person that says, well, people are not keeping Shabbat. They are rich. They are doing anything they want to do. And people are keeping Shabbat. Some of them, they are not doing well. And how do you answer that person?
Wow, an amazing question. Amazing question. Let me repeat the question. The question is, how do you answer people who are questioning and saying, certain people are extremely wealthy and they don't observe the Shabbat, and other people, and they're blessed and everything, right? Other people, they observe Shabbat and they're struggling. They're struggling in many different things. So the answer is, I think, what we've been speaking about for the past half an hour. If every single person who kept Shabbat was wealthy, then everyone would keep Shabbat. Again, tampering with our free will. Again, this concept of free will is so powerful. This concept of nature versus miracles, this concept of free will and tampering with it is something which is a thread that is throughout the tapestry of our lives and creation. So that would be the answer. The answer is that if it would be so obvious that if you keep Shabbat, you become wealthy right away, then everyone would do it. I will say on another point, the Talmud does say that a person who does keep Shabbat will be wealthy and will be satisfied. But again, it's not something that happens instantly because then there's no more free will.
If I may add,
Thank
Rabbi,
you so much.
if I may add, Rabbi, so I wanted to say something to what Eileen brought up as well. First of all, the shir was outstanding. And it's so beautiful that we're constantly reminded of the Kedusha and the importance of Shabbat, and given the opportunity to do it willfully and not because we're going to be rewarded. So to go back to what Eileen was saying, if all the Jewish people would keep 2 Shabbats consecutively, it's not that everything would be revealed right away. But what would happen is then Mashiach would come.
Yes.
And then with the steps, then we would get to the ultimate revelation. So that was the only piece that was missing from what you said. And the other thing I wanted to add was to what Mrs. Tawil said right now, that we also, of course, it's always the question of free will. That's why there isn't a schal for every mitzvah that we do, because otherwise there would be no free will because it would be so obvious. But more than that, there's cheshbon that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that we do not have the answer to. So it's not consistent. The schal could be in Olam Haba, doesn't necessarily have to be in this world. The schal for the mitzvot that we do could be for our children and our grandchildren. The richness or the blessings that we will get are not according to our perception of what is rich and what is a blessing. So these are elements that we have to always keep in mind, and to know that the HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is total emet, knows what to give everybody for what they do while remaining hidden and obscured. to allow us to live a life full of choices. And for the choice, then we get the reward.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
You wrapped it up so beautifully, Siggy. Mwah.
I forgot to say, that was beautiful. I forgot to say that, and I mentioned this to Eileen and Rachel earlier this week, that the portion from Reb Leib Heyman that we just learned was a very difficult and intricate portion. I kid you not, it took me hours to mold in my brain and be able to present it as such. It was really, really complicated. And there's even a piece that I left out because it would just be too above me, never mind above everyone here. Maybe you guys would understand it. I couldn't really understand it.
Try us.
No, I couldn't understand it. The problem's me, not you. You guys would all understand it. I'm the one who didn't understand it. But
Baruch Hashem.
no,
I did want to say something else. We're no longer being taped, right?
Here, I'll stop it now. 1 second.
Okay.